On this Thursday night, World Cup goals. The Canadian cities winning their bid to host the world's biggest soccer event.
So much of the visitor economy will benefit, but so will the broader economy.
Relief aimed at helping Canadians with rising inflation.
We will take real and tangible steps.
The Fed's 5-step plan worth $9 billion. Major change in the air. The service modifications Westjet has waiting in the wings. And need for speed.
It's going to be a fantastic weekend.
Tourists race to Montreal for the Canadian Grand Prix's return.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Farah Nasser.
Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us. Some breaking news to tell you about this hour. 2 Canadian cities will play host to the most watched sporting event on the planet. FIFA has announced Toronto and Vancouver as hosts for the 2026 World Cup. Now, they'll be joining other host cities across North America for the global event. And even though many at watch parties across the continent are celebrating, there is one Canadian city that was left out. Eric Sorensen has tonight's top story.
Go Canada! A Toronto Football Club watch party was not disappointed. Toronto, one of 2 Canadian cities that will make history. BMO Field to stage World Cup games in 2026.
Unbelievable, man. Like the World Cup coming here.
And Vancouver's BC Place will host matches, now kicking off a sport and tourism boost potentially worth hundreds of millions of dollars.
We know all the eyes of the world will be on Vancouver for those games. So much of the visitor economy will benefit, but so will the broader economy.
It's the first time FIFA picked 3 countries to co-host the World Cup. In all, 22 North American cities were considered. The Canadian venues need upgrades. Toronto's BMO Field capacity will have to be increased from 30,000 seats to 40 to 45,000 to comply with FIFA requirements. Vancouver's BC Place, the artificial turf will have to be replaced with natural grass. Capacity is not a problem. But the third candidate, Edmonton, with its historic Commonwealth Stadium, was not chosen for the World Cup. A disappointment for a city that helped elevate international soccer, in particular growing the women's game in this country.
So obviously disappointed, but I know we will continue to explore opportunities for us to host other events.
The U.S. will host the most games in stadiums across the country. And in Mexico, matches will be held in 3 cities. When Canada joined the U.S. and Mexico in a World Cup bid more than 5 years ago, the hope was to grow the sport in this country and to build a team worthy of being in the World Cup. The remarkable thing is Canadian men's soccer didn't wait for 2026. Canada shocked the soccer world when the team led by Alphonso Davies qualified spectacularly for this year's World Cup. Suddenly, a talented soccer team and the World Cup coming here.
It will bring so much more attention from the global soccer world, with Canada qualifying for the 2022 World Cup as a great lead up to 2026.
The timing couldn't be better. Men's soccer coming into its own just as the country builds World Cup fever for 2026. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
While there's no doubt hosting the World Cup will be a significant expense, the announcement comes at a time of high inflation and rising interest rates. With no promises from the federal government about funding the tournament, Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland did promise a significant announcement today on affordability. But what Canadians got instead was a speech detailing measures already announced in the last 2 budgets. Abigail Bimman reports.
Nicole isn't pleased about steep increases to the cost of living, nor the Bank of Canada hiking interest rates to try and tackle it.
But if you're still in the hustle and grind like the most of us, interest rates affect everything.
With inflation hitting 6.8% in April, what to do is on everyone's mind.
You think about what you're going to buy before you go out.
You know, what I'm buying, how much I'm buying, and when I'm buying it.
It's costing a lot of money for people that are, whether if they're a student or maybe low income.
We will take real and tangible steps to get inflation under control and to make life more affordable.
In her first major address since the budget, the finance minister wants to remind Canadians they're working on things, outlining $8.9 billion previously announced for things like $10 a day childcare, a 10% increase to old age security, and boosting the Canada Workers Benefit.
Some of it has started to arrive, A lot of it is coming in the course of this year, and it's a lot of money.
The only thing this speech will outline that's going to help them is a $7 increase. For some Canadians, that's all they're getting. Looking through these flyers, there's not a lot you can buy in a grocery store for an extra $7.
The opposition says funding these programs won't drive down inflation.
We don't believe that what Chrystia Freeland has put forward is going to help with the struggles Canadians are going through right now.
One economist tells Global News the promised measures aren't likely to help because pouring more money into the economy creates more demand.
If they work as intended, they wouldn't be creating excess demand the way that they did back in 2020 when the government just inserted a lot of money in the economy, creating excess demand, and that led to the high inflation we're seeing today.
The tricky balancing act is about how to cool down the economy without getting so cold as to drive a recession. The finance minister was asked about that in several ways. Chrystia Freeland calling it a volatile and uncertain economic time, largely driven, she says, by the global economy, and she won't speculate on what the next weeks or months may bring. Abigail Bimman, Global News, Ottawa.
And here is another example of the far-reaching impacts of the pandemic and the ongoing financial uncertainty. Westjet is scaling back operations. In a blog post, the airline says it will be concentrating on service within Western Canada and to sun destinations, and halting the expansion of its fleet of Dreamliner jets. Westjet says service to Eastern Canada will be scaled back. The airline announced plans back in March to buy low-cost rival Sunwing. In Washington, the committee investigating the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol focused on former Vice President Mike Pence and former President Donald Trump's attempts to force his VP to overturn the 2020 election. Now, even though, as the committee heard, Trump and his advisors knew they were relying on a baseless legal claim that Pence could actually do that. Jackson Proskow reports.
That Mike Pence became the target of the mob on January 6th should have been no surprise.
He can decide on the validity of these crooked ballots.
After a public pressure campaign led by former President Trump and his allies that continued while the Capitol was under attack.
Did Donald Trump ever call the vice president to check on his safety?
He did not.
The committee investigating January 6th revealed the depths of the efforts to pressure Pence, all based on false claims that Pence could somehow stop the certification of Joe Biden's victory. Even as he was whisked away for his own safety, Pence never caved. His legal advisors testified that for nearly a month they backed the VP's gut instinct that he had no authority to overturn the election.
There is no justifiable basis to conclude that the vice president has that kind of authority.
The committee heard that Trump-allied lawyer John Eastman pushed the dubious legal theory, though evidence suggests he never believed it himself and was repeatedly told to drop it.
I said, are you out of your effing mind?
Trump went along with it anyway. On the morning of January 6th, witnesses recall a heated phone call between the president and his VP.
I remember hearing the word wimp. Either he called him a wimp.
It was a different tone than I'd heard him take with the vice president before.
A short time later, Trump gave that infamous address from the White House lawn.
So I hope Mike has the courage to do what he has to do.
He continued tweeting about Pence even as the Capitol was under attack.
Mike Pence has betrayed the United States of America!
As Trump poured gas on the fire, Pence was whisked away. New photos show him waiting in a secure underground location in the Capitol during the attack, at points just 12 meters from the rioters. Most remarkable, through it all, the VP refused Secret Service attempts to evacuate him from the building.
Make no mistake about the fact that the vice president's life was in danger. A recent court filing by the Department of Justice explains that a confidential informant from the Proud Boys told the FBI that the Proud Boys would have killed Mike Pence if given a chance.
Just stunning findings coming out of the hearings today, Jackson. Could this testimony lead to criminal prosecutions against Trump or others?
Well, Farah, the committee certainly hinted that there is more to come in all of this today. In fact, the Department of Justice put out a letter requesting interview transcripts of the 1,000 people interviewed by the committee, saying they're relevant to future and ongoing criminal prosecutions. One other thing they'll likely be interested in, John Eastman, that Trump-friendly lawyer, we heard today in the committee that he proactively requested a presidential pardon in the days immediately following January 6th.
Jackson Proskow in Washington. Thank you, Jackson. All right, turning now to the war in Ukraine and a powerful show of support from Western European leaders. The trio from France, Germany, and Italy traveled to Kyiv to meet with President Volodymyr Zelensky to get a first-hand look at the destruction. As Sean O'Shea reports from Kyiv, the leaders are pledging more support for Ukraine's fight against Russia, and they are backing the country's bid to join the European Union.
As Russia's war on Ukraine reached its 112th day, Ukraine's plea for help from other countries got a welcome boost. The leaders of 3 key European countries took an overnight train to Ukraine, their first visit here since the war began. French President Emmanuel Macron, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, and Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi, meeting with Ukraine's leadership and getting a tour of Irpin, a half-hour west of the capital.
The war has started not on the 24th of February. The war has started in 2014.
This is a city where 70% of all buildings have been destroyed by Russian shelling. Macron telling reporters massacres were carried out. We have the first signs of war crimes. The German Chancellor described what he called the brutality of the Russian war of aggression. The destruction this war is causing, he said, is terrible. The leaders came here for more than just a tour, though. After a meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, Macron promised to provide 6 more Caesar long-range guns to Ukraine. As a group, the leaders all said they support granting Ukraine status in the European Union immediately, a move that could make it easier to get more support from neighboring countries soon. And a decision on EU status is right around the corner. The EU meets a week from now to decide whether Ukraine will be accepted, possibly with some conditions. And President Zelensky's been invited to attend the G7 summit, which begins June 26th. But he won't be leaving Ukraine. He'll be joining by video link. Farah.
Sean O'Shea reporting. Thank you, Sean. In their own words, coming up, a broadcast exclusive with the 2 men wrongly arrested in the Parliament Hill bomb scare. Two Sikh rally organizers arrested near Parliament Hill Saturday after a false bomb tip are speaking out tonight in a broadcast exclusive. Ottawa police say the RCMP is investigating, while there are growing calls from the Sikh community for answers about what led to the arrests. Mercedes Stevenson reports.
It's a really dark day of my life.
I mean, it's totally disturbing, totally destroying my reputation.
2 prominent Sikh community organizers targeted in a terrorism hoax want answers and a police apology after they were arrested and detained on a bogus tip claiming they planned to blow up car bombs near Parliament Hill.
I couldn't sleep since Saturday night. You know, it's going through in my mind who's behind this.
Parminder and Manveer came to Ottawa for a peaceful annual rally they organized to commemorate the June 1984 massacre of Sikhs in India. It never occurred to either of the men that the massive police presence they found on Parliament Hill was looking for them. After a detailed tip from the Canada Border Services Agency, police had their photographs and license plates. Manveer had just finished speaking at the rally when officers approached him.
He said, you know that there's explosives in your car? I said, no, sir, I just came from my home. You know, I brought my family in the same car.
Parminder was next.
Well, we got a threat under your name, a bomb threat under your name, and I got shocked. I mean, I said, what? I mean, I can't believe this.
Both were arrested, handcuffed, and taken to the police station.
They asked me to remove my turban.
A deeply painful act for a Sikh man.
These are religious signs, and we are connected with them emotionally. But I had no choice because the allegation was too big. You know, they could do anything if I'm not obeying them.
You're wasting taxpayer money. What is this nonsense?
After a couple of hours, police said the 2 were victims of a terrorism hoax, apologized, and released them.
I say, I know that I'm not involved in this, but the way the situation being handled is totally wrongfully.
Interim Police Chief Steve Bell defended the force's response, saying the warning came in at 11 a.m., giving police little time to respond. Bell said police acted in good faith and worked as quickly and effectively as possible. The experience shocked the two Canadian citizens.
I'm not that kind of person. We love Canada.
Both are well-known leaders with extensive political contacts. Parminder has worked with Conservative, Liberal and NDP politicians. Manveer has been an outspoken supporter of an independent Khalistan, an issue that has been a flashpoint in Canada-India relations. Manveer says he was supposed to be part of Prime Minister Trudeau's official delegation to India in 2018, but wasn't able to board the PM's plane. So he went on his own dime and was greeted with controversy over his Khalistani separatist views, which he has said have always been peaceful. Regardless of what's behind Saturday's hoax, the two men want to know who or what targeted them, fearing it could happen again. Farah?
Mercedes Stevenson in Ottawa. Thank you, Mercedes. Canada's Chief Justice says the legal system cannot go back to the way things were before the pandemic.
Our justice system must continue to modernize and to innovate. It is our duty to do so, knowing that access to justice is not just one basic right or service, but first and foremost a basic human need, and as such, it is an essential ingredient of democracy.
Richard Wagner made the comments during his annual update on the work of the Supreme Court. He admits meeting the expectation of timely justice is a big task, with so many courts facing backlogs. But he believes processes can be improved.
The current privacy law in Canada was last updated more than 20 years ago. That was before the advent of technologies such as social media and smartphones. It is therefore high time to ensure that Canada has a strong, a safe, and very flexible regulatory framework which is adapted to today's technology.
That's Science and Innovation Minister François-Philippe Champagne. He's introducing new federal legislation today aimed at regulating the way companies collect and use data in Canada and the use of AI. The bill would force that consent is obtained through plain language instead of legal jargon, ensure data is secure, and allow Canadians to permanently delete information. Temperature records scorched ahead. Tens of millions of Americans simmer under a dangerous heat wave. Over a third of the U.S. population is being urged to stay inside as a dangerous heat wave settles in. More than 100 million Americans are under heat alerts. Temperatures are soaring across the Midwest, Southeast, and parts of Southern California and Arizona. More than a dozen cities are setting temperature records, reaching over 43 degrees in some areas. Forecasters say it could take weeks to feel some relief. And an extreme heat event is also hitting parts of Europe. Temperatures in Spain and France are reaching highs not normally recorded until midsummer. Forecasters in southern France have activated a heat alert. Temperatures are expected to exceed 40 degrees in some places by this weekend. The hot air mass is coming in from neighboring Spain, where early June temperatures are the highest registered in the country in the last 20 years. Both countries already recorded the hottest May on record. Actor Kevin Spacey was granted unconditional bail during his first appearance at a British court over charges of sexual assault dating back almost 20 years.
Keep moving! Keep moving!
Spacey was mobbed by the media as he arrived in London today, where he faces 5 sexual assault charges involving 3 British men and dating back to 2005. The 62-year-old was not asked to enter pleas for the alleged offenses. He's scheduled to be back in court on July 14th. Fast and festive. Next, Montrealers gear up for the return of a high-speed competition. Montreal is revving up for the return of the Canadian Grand Prix after a long pandemic pause. Now, few places on the planet embrace Formula One quite like Quebecers. As Dan Spector reports, the race is the only Canadian stop on the F1 calendar and is by far Montreal's biggest event of the year.
Le premier participant
The streets of downtown Montreal haven't been this busy since June of 2019, and that can only mean one thing. The cars are back, the tourists are back, and after 2 consecutive COVID cancellations, the Formula One Canadian Grand Prix is finally making its long-awaited return.
It's really nice to see us coming back to a little bit more of a normal scenario.
Sure, they come for the race, but while they're here, visitors drop big money. A tourism industry ravaged by the pandemic is exploding with excitement.
Don't push, you just push.
This Montreal bar owner says reservations are pouring in, and everyone wants champagne.
It's almost half of our profit of the year.
You know, we're fully booked. It's 97% occupancy in our hotel. Same thing in terms of the Airbnb situation. So it's going to be a fantastic weekend.
According to Tourism Montreal, the Canadian Grand Prix is the biggest tourist event in Canada, attracting more visitors than both the Toronto International Film Festival and the Calgary Stampede. More than 100,000 people have descended on the city to soak in a sport that's exploded in popularity since the last race in 2019.
You can be the hero today but forgotten tomorrow.
The Netflix series Formula One Drive to Survive has been credited with bringing in a whole new generation of fans.
I didn't know anything about F1 before my boyfriend told me to watch Drive to Survive, and I got hooked.
I think it shows you how much more is behind the scenes as well. It's not just cars going around in circles.
Yeah.
It's a very, very chaotic.
Practice laps, qualifying, and the race itself are all sold out, and race organizers are expecting record-breaking attendance figures.
One boy's a big Williams fan, the other one's a big Ferrari fan.
Hope Red Bull wins.
And those attending will be treated to some Canadian content. Montreal natives Lance Stroll and Nicholas Latifi will be racing in front of their hometown crowd. A very loud weekend ahead for a city that was all too quiet for far too long. Dan Spector, Global News, Montreal.
And that is Global National for this Thursday night. I'm Farah Nasser. Thank you so much for spending part of your evening with us. Tonight's Your Canada is Lake Temagami in Ontario. Until tomorrow, take care of yourselves and each other. Good night.